Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session on the funding gaps with entrepreneurial women. And we will wait for another couple of minutes until all my panelists are on board, and then we'll start the discussion. Hello, Usha. Hello, Ragini. So good to see you. Absolutely a pleasure to have you today. And let us just hold off for another couple of minutes so that we can see if the rest of the panelists would join in, and we would take it from there. However, we have started live streaming, so I just wanted to make you aware of that. Usha, you are on mute.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it's amazing to see you.
My pleasure, and definitely looking forward to a very enriching session.
Yeah.
In fact, this is such a topic close to heart. I'm all ears.
Yeah, that's true.
Hi, Swayata. So good to have you. We are already live streaming. So the social media links are on. We are just holding off for the next 1 or 2 minutes to chit chat until the rest of the panelists come on board.
Fantastic. Thank you for having us, Shinjini.
Absolutely my pleasure. And it's my privilege to see all of you together. And I was talking about, how dear this topic is to everybody's heart, especially entrepreneurs.
Indeed, indeed. I'm looking forward to a very interesting discussion today.
Absolutely. Hello, Anushka. So good to have you.
Hi, everybody. Lovely to see you all.
Pleasure.
Is this working? There we go. Great to see you all.
What time is it, Anushka, there?
It is 8:30 a.m.
Have you had morning coffee?
You know what? I haven't yet, so forgive me for anything I say.
You're always spot on.
Let's hope. Let's hope.
Interestingly, now that we have got 2 extra minutes to talk, I just completed moderating another session, which was on a very different topic, which was on handloom and the economic sustenance of the artisans, as well as the ecological balance and sensibility and sensitivity around the product and handloom versus powerloom. And we had Bibi Russell, who is, of course, a very big name in the handloom space. She's from Bangladesh. She popularized gamcha, and she was creating, bow ties out of gamcha. And she said that as an entrepreneur, she refuses to write, spend her time writing what I'll just quote what she said. She says that, as an artist, as an entrepreneur, I refuse to spend my time and energy writing proposals. So I have put in every last piece I had, because I did not want to get into that space of, getting refused and not being able to do the work I'm meant to do because of whatever it takes to raise funds. And I thought it was very well timed, and it was almost destined, because we were just walking into this session. And we'll talk about a lot of the process and the possibilities of funding.
Indeed, Shinjini. So, Shinjini, one quick check. Would you be introducing the panelist?
No, you are the moderator.
Right, fine.
Yes. Yeah. So okay. I will just start the panel and leave it to you, and then step back. Yeah.
So guys, you have such extensive accomplished profiles, and I thought you yourself could do best justice. I will definitely do mention your name and where you come from, what you do. But I would give you 2 minutes, as I mentioned in my email, to introduce yourself and really give a bit of story about why you are here today, what each of you have really been very, very passionate about this topic. So I really want to bring on that story as to what drives that passion.
Absolutely. Swayata, we are at 7 o'clock. So why don't I just take a minute to welcome you once more, all of you, to this lovely panel on this lovely evening, morning, and different time zones of the world. It is my utmost privilege to be a part of this screen right now. And also in advance, a big congratulations to each one of you, because you will be conferred the award of the Exceptional Leader of Excellence by the Annual Women Economic Forum 2021. So with that happy and celebratory note, I leave the forum and the space to you, Sweta, to take everybody through this lovely discussion. And I'll be waiting on the side, listening to all of you. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Shinjini. So guys, I'm here to talk about the topic, bridging the funding gap for women entrepreneurs. At a time when women are hitting the bosses and entering the billionaires club, it is definitely a very good time for us to come together and celebrate. From the pioneers like Kiran Majumdar-Shaw, who have shown that nothing can come in the way of their fiery streak, to the more new age unicorn owners like Falguni Nair, we all are aware that women are no less, and new age entrepreneurs like Falguni Nair are bearing the torch of inspiration forward, right? However, on the other side, if we look at the funding numbers, we've seen that year to date this year, the VC funding in the startups have gone up by 4 times. However, the percentage that still goes to women-led startups or women entrepreneurs is abysmally low. So here we are today to talk about the untapped opportunity, the potential, and how to create an equitable ecosystem for our women entrepreneurs, for them to be equally, if not more, successful. So today I have very, very accomplished speakers, all from the investment fraternity. However, all of them bring together very diverse or come from very diverse backgrounds. I have Usha Amin, who runs her own VC fund. She has co-founded the same. I have Ragini, who is the investment director at a Caspian Debt. And I have Anushka, who heads the Gender Lens Finance globally for HSBC. Today, Anushka is joining us from the US. So with such diverse experience, I'm sure we are going to look forward to what these speakers have to say today. But before I do pass on to them to talk a bit more about themselves and why they are so passionate about this topic, I would like to tell you that, I have personally spoken to each one of them, and I was amazed by their backgrounds, history, story, and, the things that bring them here today jointly to discuss this topic. They all come with some kind of background and history and why they are today and why they're so passionately involved with this agenda. So with that, Anushka, can I pass on to you to start with your introduction?
Absolutely. No, thank you so much, Shweta, and thank you everybody for having me today. Really thrilled to be talking about this topic. As Shweta kindly mentioned, so I run HSBC's Gender Lens Finance initiative, and why I'm passionate about this topic, I think, is the question that you asked, right, Shweta, is that when we started Gender Lens Finance, I was very, very keen to make sure that we were thinking about supporting women as smart business and good business for us to do, right? Women are 50% of the population. They are due to control 70 to 80% of consumer spending. They are going to be an absolute firepower in our economies and our societies, but yet they are underserved in pretty much every aspect of life, right? But specifically in financial markets and in capital. And as a financial institution, I think there's a huge role that we can play to help bridge those gaps and to get more power and funding into the hands of women and women-led businesses. And so, that's kind of what started Gender Lens Finance. And, really thrilled to be able to talk a little bit more about that today. But again, thank you for having me, Shweta, and I'll pass on to the next speaker to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Anushka. Ragini, should we go with you next?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Shweta. It's an honor to be with Usha and Anushka here and with you moderating. So thanks a lot for that. So basically, I'll talk a little bit about my personal story. I'm a middle child of a very middle-class Punjabi family, and only one of the first in that whole generation, me and my sisters, who were given English medium education, And of course, my dad had to really pay bitterly for that from relatives and everything. So I had held that very closely that, this is an opportunity I have and I want to make best of it. And I went to a college which was serving social entrepreneurs, which is IRMA, which also shaped my thinking and life. And the third thing that really shaped was that my husband had 2 failed startups. So I've seen up close what entrepreneurs go through. And over my work in the investing thing, I thought that if my husband being a male faced so much challenge. One can just imagine what women would face. And as soon as I got an opportunity in my last job to head an education fund and now a debt fund where I lead investments, I thought I found my place to give back, contribute, and use whatever influence I have to improve equitable funding for women, and entrepreneurs in general, be more responsive and, as investors. Yeah, so that's my story. Thank you.
Thank you, Ragini. Great to know your story. Usha, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Shweta, for having us here. And thank you, Anushka and Ragini. Absolutely great to hear your stories as well. So I'm from Bangalore, and I'm a CA by profession. And after finishing my education, of course, worked with a manufacturing company, and then went on to become a CFO for an IT company. And from there, started on with an entrepreneurship with my husband. And of course, events happen, things change. And as being a woman and handling the finance itself was, I think, one thing where men weren't able to really stand that kind of, what do you say, a power dynamic, people need men to handle it. And when they feel a bit insecure about a woman handling that. So going through a lot of phases like that, of course, and understanding that what actually transpires in the financial industry. Started off with the fund, the Saha Fund for Women Entrepreneurship and Technology. And it's been a great journey. We've invested in 10 women entrepreneurs, and their stories have been absolutely mind-boggling, because one of them, like we heard when before we funded them, was they went to 83 investors and have pitched to them. And there were questions like, after getting married, how are you going to manage the business? And, some questions like that. So I think it's been a lot of change from then on, almost 6 years now. And we've seen a lot of change in the industry, and thanks to the women in the industry who made that change happen. And of course, you've got a long way to go. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Usha. And I would completely agree. We do see a lot of change. I see that entrepreneurs these days, women entrepreneurs in particular, are very different from the previous generation. They are so much more ambitious, confident, and passionate about their ideas. So Anushka, could I ask you, if they are so confident and passionate, then what is stopping them from becoming entrepreneurial leaders?
Thanks for the question, Shweta. And I agree with you. I think it's very troubling, right, when you think about the statistics that we still see in the market when we think about female entrepreneurship. I think, Shweta, you mentioned a couple in your introduction there, but some of the statistics still are completely boggling to me. In 2021, the fact that there is still a $1.5 trillion gap for women, small and medium enterprises, and the fact that only 2.3% of venture capital dollars in the US went to women in 2020. And by the way, that number went down from 2.8% the previous year, right? So the thing that's really troubling to me is the fact that we have these, a wonderful sort of superpower, if you will, in the world that is, being creative, innovating, but yet the sort of trajectory of where capital is going is actually going in the wrong direction. And I think that is incredibly troubling, right? And we need to ask ourselves why that is the case and how can we solve for it. I think what was interesting was that at HSBC, we actually conducted some research a couple of years ago called She's the Business, where we surveyed 1,200 entrepreneurs to unpack these issues a little bit, right? And to really dig into what is causing these issues and how can we look to support. And sort of, 4 key pieces of that really stand out to me around sort of why women are still perhaps struggling to get access to that capital. So the first one was around access to networks and resources. That was something that we saw is difficult for women. And certainly that was something that was reflected in this study. And I think it's something that is fairly well known, right? That there's an access to capital issue, but an access to resources and networks, right? That kind of help propel and give you that virtuous cycle of being able to access more and grow your business and further what you're doing. The second one that came up was the lack of role models, right? And I suppose it's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation, right? Where, we need to get more women into those seats, into those prominent seats. And again, Shweta, you mentioned a few fantastic entrepreneurs that have really made a huge success in the last year, 18 months or so. We need to propel those into the limelight so that we can create more role models for female entrepreneurs going forward. The third one that came up was around knowledge and sort of, financial know-how, right? How can we equip female entrepreneurs with the know-how that they need to get access to capital, to get access to networks? Again, perhaps that's something that is, maybe through bias or other reasons not delivered to women in certain markets in the same way. But again, something that, as a financial institution, something that we can certainly help to overcome. And then the final one, which I think is perhaps one of the most pertinent ones, and again, I think Usha and Ragini, you mentioned parts of this in your introductions as well, is around the piece around bias, right? The fact that for better or worse, there is still a significant amount of bias in the investment processes. When you think about pitching to a group of, venture capitalists or whatever it might be, I do think that there are still issues with the fact that perhaps, around the table, we need maybe a bit more diversity so that they can understand, certain different perspectives and kind of bring different things to the table. And so, I think that's certainly one, again, that we can maybe help to overcome by kind of being more intentional about, who is listening to those pitches, how we're analyzing the pitches, making sure that there are more diverse perspectives around the table when we're making investment decisions as well. But I think, those are sort of 4 components that we really need to be focused on in order to address that access to capital issue, which of course is perhaps one of the most pressing issues when it comes to supporting female entrepreneurs going forward.
Thank you, Anushka, spot on. And I think you did cover all the aspects that would lead us to a better way forward. But I would also like to ask if any of the other panelists, Ragini or Usha, would you have to add anything further to what Anushka has said? All right, looks like.
Yeah. So just, I think I'll cover that a little bit on the ecosystem bit, but I think Anushka, you are spot on the 4 things that you, and especially about the bias and the networks, because I think there is no gender lens around. All networking happens over dinner, over drinks, over, so not many women are able to come, very simple things that there are never breakfast meetings for networking, right? So how do women make it? Yeah.
Right. So Usha, I would move on to you for the next question. We've seen, and I'm sure you, as part of your VC investment process, have seen and cannot deny that the pitching process plays a very, very important role in the decision making as to where do you invest in, which venture do you invest in. So what are some of the tips that you would give our women entrepreneurs to navigate this process successfully? And what has been your experience with women entrepreneurs in this process?
Yes, so I think Anushka has covered quite a bit on that as well. And yeah, spot on with the problems that we see the women entrepreneurs especially facing. So to tell you the story about our own fund, when we went pitching to the LPs for starting this fund, almost about 80 of them turned it down, saying that it's an impact fund and they don't invest in impact. And it is a for-profit fund, of course, but they didn't believe in the story. And I think the biggest problem everyone faced was a good pipeline. So and yes, of course, we do struggle with a good pipeline, but not anymore. I think now there have been a lot of incubation centers, which really help them do that. And they also train them on the pitching process. And I think there is a lot of information available on the net as well for the pitching. But I would tell you from the concept that we as investors really see in the first few minutes, because you don't get much time with the entrepreneurs. And so if the entrepreneur can really explain things really crystal clear in the first 4 to 5 slides, I think we win the audience there. So I look at it in the way that who the organization is. That means they answer the questions of who, what, why, whom, for what, when, where, and with. So basically, the first thing is about what the organization is about, who the organization is, what the purpose is, and what is the product or service about, what does it address, and why has it come into existence, solving what issues, what are the issues currently that they are able to address, and who are the target customers, and when does it start, when do people use it, and when do they start scaling? Those are kind of questions that we look at, that how is going to to go on, and when do we get our exit? I think that's the biggest question where we really don't get an answer as how are we going to get that exit. So what are the plans? Is there, is there a market? Is there going to be a merger, an acquisition, an IPO? So we start looking at those things initially because the fund life is just about 6 to 7 years, or maximum 8. And we need to really see how it's going to shape up within those times. And with us, the team, I think that's very, very essential because it all requires a cohesive team to work along with and see whether they all meet the common goal. And the resources, with us, the resources, we, the team, and where is going to be heading in, say, the first 2-3 years. The financials have to explain whatever explanations and the story that they have built about. And yeah, that's the main thing. Of course, I mean, in the investment language, we have a lot of terms of capital used, allocated, and all those stuff. But I think simplicity way where entrepreneurs can understand is if they have these things very crystal clear, and then it becomes very easy for the investors to make that decision whether they want to go ahead or not. Yeah.
Thank you, Usha. So a very well thought out, well researched, well articulated pitch is very, very important in terms of making the investment decision. So Ragini and Anushka, would you like to add anything further to what Usha has said?
Maybe just one quick point. I think this was perhaps not related to the sort of process there, but a point that really resonated with me that Usha said, though, was the fact that it was viewed as an impact initiative versus a sort of, for-profit business initiative. And I think, that is one point which is incumbent on all of us, right? To keep reminding people that this is good business and smart business to do, right? This is, in fact, people talk about, oh, is this, more risky? Are we increasing risk? In fact, women have shown that they are, better at paying back loans. There are fewer non-performing loans in portfolios that include women-led businesses. And, the returns are certainly something that we can hope that will deliver as well in the long term. But I think, that was just one piece that really resonated with me, and certainly something we hear across the board, right? But I think it's shifting that mindset as well to it being smart, good business to do. This isn't a question of nice to have, we've done a nice thing. This is good, smart business. And I think it's interesting that we sometimes still hear that rhetoric around impact.
Completely agree with Anushka, and Usha, of course, made excellent point about this business case. Actually, there is a whole industry called microfinance which got built just on women paying back. It is on that back of that, So there is a business case which is proven. I don't know how much more data we need to do that. So completely agree with you, Shana.
Yeah, in fact, to add on, the pandemic really proved the resilience of people. And in fact, all the women entrepreneurs that I've seen have done excellently well. They've got so much of great determination and, resilience to go on during this time. In fact, they've done much better than the men also.
Absolutely.
So we had actually banked on men who were actually doing businesses for the women, for empowering women. And in fact, they themselves couldn't survive during this time. So that's a pretty good example. And of course, the IPO of Nykaa, we've seen.
Nykaa was the only profitable company to go to IPO with 50% stake left with Falguni. That's like an amazing. What else do you need? None of the companies with the 4 IPOs were profitable. Policybazaar, others, I don't want, So yeah, it speaks volumes about how.
Indeed. And Ragini very rightly pointed out, the microfinance industry is such an appropriate example. You've seen the levels of NPAs in the wider industry. And if you compare that to microfinance, you know what you're heading for if you're lending to women entrepreneurs. So we absolutely don't need any further data beyond that. And it's very proven in even the difficult years. And for years, we've consistently seen very low NPAs. So Ragini, I'll go to you with my next question, which is, obviously, women entrepreneurs need to raise their visibility and do their bit to have a successful pitching process. But I think it is also incumbent on the investor community to create a more equitable ecosystem so that women entrepreneurs are successful overall and the biases, etc., are removed. Anushka did allude to that.
Yeah.
So what are your views on that?
No, absolutely, Sweta. And I think it starts from where Usha mentioned about pipeline. So if you see, number of women in colleges, technology, biotechnology has been increasing. So we definitely have a pool of talent there, right? So it's incumbent on incubators who go spot talent. So there are especially women incubators, which is different. But we need incubators who incorporate gender lens in their whole program, whether it is male entrepreneur or female. And when I talk about gender lens, it is about product, how you build the product. Are you missing out on the 50% of who are going to use it in terms of your market research? How many women you have in your companies, on your governance board, because they're diverse views. So that gender lens has to come in, and being, like Anushka said, intentional about getting those number of women in your program and continuing that at the acceleration phase, because the research shows that all the investors will ask promotional questions to men, like how big you will grow, how will you capture the market, and to women they will ask about, okay, what is the downside, when will you break even, and things like that. So accelerator need to prepare women, have a program with a gender lens which tells them how to convert this promotional question to a preventive question to a promotional question. As soon as you go into preventive mode, your wallet size reduces for women or anybody, as soon as you start thinking this. But when we are thinking larger vision, we are willing to put out more money, so the onus is on accelerators to prepare, and also women to be very thorough with numbers. Don't leave it to their chartered accountants or male co-founder. Take it head on. Like Usha said, you need to know your numbers. And coming to investors, I think there is a business case for diversity. So within their own teams, their own processes. But can investors come together and look at this as a problem to be solved? That, okay, our portfolio is not diverse. How is it that we can solve it? So I'm not even telling you that you're biased or you're whatever. I'm saying, let's take this as a problem. Let's look at all the processes, starting from pitching to really evaluating and due diligence, and see what better can we do. Because there's a research which says that if your job description goes out saying ambitious, aggressive, then 5% women will apply. So you're automatically ruling out talent. Similarly, is something in the way you are attracting applications saying that women think that this is not something that they want to be part of? So can you bring that gender lens across and come together to solve a problem? Because diversity has a business case,
Agreed. And Ragini, I don't think it is anymore a moral obligation, right?
Not
it's an untapped opportunity. And the numbers speak for themselves. I mean, you are definitely leaving money on the table if you're not investing in women entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
You are putting a cap on the economic growth of the country if you're not investing in women entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
Right.
And start with yourself and then bring it to your portfolio companies, is what I would say.
Anushka and Usha, would you like to add anything further to what Ragini has said?
No, I think that's very comprehensive.
Yeah, she's covered almost everything, yes.
Fantastic. So Usha, I'll go to you with my next question. And Anushka did allude to this when she was talking about the initial point where I asked her what needs to be done to get to have more women entrepreneurs or entrepreneur leaders, where one of the points she said that there aren't enough women who are decision makers. So stats and numbers says that only 12% of VC or investment decision makers in VC funds are women in US. And when you look at the emerging market, the numbers are even lower. It's just about 8%. So do you think that impacts the decision making, and what can we do about that?
Yeah, I think there are very many problems. I think, it's a very complex kind of a system where it's mostly, I would actually boil it down to a change in the mindset, a change in the culture that has been built up over a period of time, the patriarchal systems. We need to really break those systems apart. It's like creating a new systemic formation to help emerge the women entrepreneurship. And I think one of the most important criteria is the support system. So like, for example, I would say that women themselves have to be a great support to the women community, because until and unless that happens, it's going to be very difficult to make any change happen. And women themselves have to take up the lead to make sure that if they have, the nuances and the capabilities to really come up and create a kind of an ecosystem which can support other women entrepreneurs to emerge. I think that should be the key. And as Anushka has already mentioned about the minuscule number in the decision-making process, the woman being there in the decision-making process in these industries. So if you look at the financial sector itself, I think the about 8% is what the women employees and management is. So it's so low. And of course, if you look at the total global employment ratios with men and women, it's far, far below. And if you look at India, it's just among the last, you know, and I have not seen this change in the last 6 years. I've just seen that we are still at that bottom level. So women coming up in the forefront and management positions, decision-making positions, I think those are key areas because they can help other women. I mean, they see it from a different angle. So the bias can be reduced, which we normally see because it's so male-dominated industry. And it's very, very essential. And finance is a key resource. As long as there is going to be a kind of limitation for growth because of finance, then I think that needs to be addressed foremost. And yeah, like I would say, mindset is a major change, just not for men, but also for women, because I think women have to make that change for the men as well. So like somewhere I was reading that how the men going to manage the empowered women to say which are emerging now. So I think that also needs to be taken care of. So to educate and, you know, make men understand that what is actually transpiring. And it's not men against the woman or, you know, it's a gender bias that we are trying to create, but it's just that there is so much capabilities that we are actually suppressing today and not allowing that to emerge. You know, it's more of that, where there are talents and they don't have opportunities to grow because of certain constraints. And I think we are responsible ourselves to not allow, you know, those constraints to be driven out. So I think there's a whole new role that we as women at the realm of these affairs have to take ownership to make sure that we bring in that change.
Completely agree, Usha. Ragini or Anushka, would you like to add anything further to that?
So I just wanted to say, you know, Usha brings in a very important point about women themselves owning their capacity and capability. So I just wanted to give one stat, like, you know, in urban areas, unpaid caregiving work done by women is around 3 hours, and that done by men is around 20 minutes. You know, so how is it? Because see, women are there, but our social cultural context is not keeping up with that. Exactly. You know.
Yeah.
So where the gender roles within the house and also women thinking that this is just my job, you know, that the shift has to happen both ways. And unless and until one frees up and there is more equity in sort of role development, roles within and outside, you will not be able to achieve your full potential, you know. Yeah. So that's what I would like to add. Yeah. Anushka?
Nothing further to add on that. Very comprehensive again and super interesting.
Indeed. So Ragini, since you are an investment director at Caspian Debt, let me shift a bit from VC investing to alternate form of investment. It is often believed that raising traditional debt is very, very difficult, especially in early and growth stages of a venture, because obviously there isn't any kind of proven track record, neither is there a cash flow or collateral. However, you can definitely raise debt if you account for that as a part of your overall funding mix, right? So what would you advise women entrepreneurs on debt funding?
Yeah. So maybe, you know, we feel that it's a gender stereotype or thinking that women manage their business well, but we have enough data now to know that they really manage their businesses well. And startups and entrepreneurs nowadays, what gets celebrated is the funding. Nobody celebrates a profitable business. You know, it's more about, okay, I got this funding and this valuation. So I think women being a little bit I trust women to be able to see through this
Yeah.
and know that best financing is from customers. So if you sell, you ensure that you get the money back from them. And second is get a right funding mix. Look, Falguni had 50% of her stake before she went to IPO, right? She still retained that. And she could do that because she had the right mix of equity and debt, you know. So debt gives you non-dilutive capital. And now banks, of course, would require your profitability, mortgage collateral and others. But there are other non-traditional fintech lenders and Caspian debt, you know, where investment team is led by women, underwriting team is led by women. That's why last year we did like 46% of our disbursement to women-led businesses. So I think it naturally attracts, you know, because when you see that, so that's the case for diversity right there. And then, so I feel that there is a space for non-dilutive capital, these alternate forms who look at your bank statements, who look at your GST, your governance, they look at your path to profitability, they look at your frugality, you know, because there is no, you know, people get a lot of this thing about cash burn, but we women know that we don't spend more than what we have or what we are likely to have, right? We've managed budgets all our life. So I'm not stereotyping, but I'm talking about sensible financial management. And I think there are alternative channels that you can use, which look at not your mortgage collateral, but your business model, its potential, its road to profitability, and you know, values profitability over valuation. You know, all that will follow if you have the right business model. Yeah.
Fantastic. Great to know, Ragini. Anushka, would you like to add anything further?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, just to echo everything Ragini said, I think it's, you know, often when we think about entrepreneurship and we think about startups, we automatically think venture capital and equity, right? Like it's kind of the connection we make. And I remember once being, you know, sort of at a pitch day with female entrepreneurs, and a lot of them said, we don't want equity investors right now, right? Because that obviously takes a piece of the pie away from them, and it obviously inflicts some, you know, sort of restrictions around that as well. And what they want is just, you know, working capital that can actually just help take their business from sort of A to B. And so, you know, that's something for us as sort of stewards of capital to be aware of as well, right? That there are different ways in which we can support, and we need to be open-minded to that as well. But just to complement everything Ragini said, I thought they were really interesting points.
Fantastic. So Anushka, while we have you, financial institutions and especially HSBC is doing a lot in this arena, and you are at the helm of it, leading all the gender lens finance initiatives across the group. So what more can financial institutions and corporates do in general to bridge the financing gap? And also if you would like to elaborate what in particular HSBC is doing around this particular topic.
Sure, thanks for the question, Shweta. Look, I think there is a huge role that corporates and financial institutions can play when you think about the influence that they have outside of their four walls, right? Be that with their customers, their communities, their supply chains, the list goes on, right? The type of impact and ripple effect that these organizations can have globally is significant. I think importantly as well, you know, as the ESG agenda sort of climbs up, you know, on sort of corporate and financial institutions lists of, you know, some of the most important and strategic initiatives that they're focused on, you know, the S of ESG, as we know, that social component of ESG has become more prominent as well, right? Especially through the pandemic, and thinking about how you can support women and women-led businesses as part of your business very much forms part of that S of ESG as well, which we think is a really important part to focus on. So I think, Shweta, the second part of your question was around sort of what have we been doing as HSBC, and that, you know, a few things that I think we can point to, which, you know, I think, you know, we've been really pleased to see sort of progress again over the last sort of year, 18 months in particular, where women and girls have been most disproportionately impacted by COVID. So, you know, through Gender Lens Finance, which is the initiative that I run for HSBC, you know, we focus on sort of three key components, if you will. The first is, you know, surprise, surprise, around access to capital, right? You know, as a financial institution, how can we get more capital into the hands of women and women-led businesses? And we've seen this play out in a number of sort of transactions with our clients already. So, be that gender bonds, where the proceeds of that bond are going towards supporting women, small and medium enterprises. We've done the same with some lending transactions as well, again, where we've said that a piece of it needs to go towards supporting women-led businesses. We've partnered with large corporates to deliver payment solutions to support female micro entrepreneurs as well. And we've also done some sort of supply chain solutions as well, right? Working with large corporates and thinking about how you can support minority and female suppliers in their ecosystem. The second piece that we've been sort of focused on is around what we call sort of activist capital, if you will, right? So how can we, as a steward of capital, hold that capital conditional on, the project, the client we're financing, achieving certain, key performance indicators and targets and goals. I think a lot of people have seen this already play out in what's called the sustainability linked market. But what we think has been really interesting is the fact that we can now integrate gender KPIs into those types of things as well, right? So putting in a clause that says women in leadership, if the company meets their women in leadership target of, I'm making up numbers here, going from 40 to 45%, they get a reduction in the price that they pay. And if they don't meet the target, they get an increase in the price that they pay. So, really showing that there's a bottom line implication to not achieving these goals. And certainly those types of KPIs could definitely, I think, be extrapolated in the future to supporting female-led businesses and female entrepreneurs in the ecosystems as well. And then the sort of final pillar that we've been focused on is around products and services. And I think, Ragini, you kind of mentioned applying that gender lens to everything that you do, right? And so this is thinking about how we can support things that promote gender equality more broadly, right? Thinking about how consumers use products, thinking about healthcare, thinking about education, more topically childcare, without which we are never going to have the full and equal participation of women, right? So, we're thinking about how can we look at every transaction through that lens. What is the gender lens that we can kind of bring to the table? So that's kind of, one piece that we've been doing. And again, so, very pleased to say we've been able to see some, pioneering transactions in that space. I think, finally, I realize I've said a lot here already, but I think very importantly, us being HSBC and being able to support our female customers is incredibly, incredibly important. And, overcoming barriers they face in accessing networks and resources has been a huge focus for us as well. And to do this, we've been running a number of initiatives globally to do this. So, one of them is called HSBC Raw, which we launched in Hong Kong, the US, and the UK, where we're providing coaching, resources, etc., to female entrepreneurs. We've done our Accelerating Women Entrepreneurs in India with Wiki, spearheaded here by Shweta. So I would let her elaborate more on that, of course, but a fantastic program and one that we're very proud of. And in Latin America, we've launched a program called Mujeres al Mundo. So working in Argentina and Uruguay as of now, again, supporting female entrepreneurs and clients in their journey, providing them with access to resources and networks. Again, noticing that we're HSBC, recognizing the power of our community and our networks and hoping to deliver that to female entrepreneurs and customers going forward. So, hopefully that kind of gives you a little bit of a summary as to how we've been thinking about gender lens at HSBC, the types of things we're doing. But look, I will say this is just the beginning, and there's of course way more that we can continue to be doing as well. And we very much look forward to doing that.
Thank you, Anushka. I always feel incredibly proud when I hear about all the things going on in the world. And obviously you mentioned about the Accelerating Women Entrepreneurs Program. I must say that with partners like Caspian Red, Wiki, Startup India, we have been able to make a remarkable difference in the access to capital, in the networking opportunities, in the know-how, etc. For the cohort that joined us. We got about 550 women entrepreneurs apply to this program. So there is a lot that we can do. And I love the way that Anushka defined it. And I think gender lens finance is also a term that she chose for the initiatives that are going on globally. That is to put a gender lens on each of the financial and business decisions that corporates and institutions and VCs and debt houses take. If we are able to do that, I'm sure we will move forward significantly and with pace. It was so fantastic to hear all your views and so much passion and energy in this discussion today. I would also like to open it up now to the audience to ask you some questions they might have. So over to the audience to please ask your question. I must say that I do not have chat facility on the equipment that I am on. So if you do have any question, please ask it to the panelist.
They may not have unmute facility. I think only the host can tell us probably in the Zoom webinar.
All right. Shinjini, are you on there? Hi, Shinjini, do we have you? I'm so sorry. So while we are getting the question and Shinjini to unmute the participants, maybe I might want to ask each of you that if there is a pledge that you would like to take to work even more further towards this cause that we are talking about, what is it that you would continue to do or do differently going forward? Anyone can take this.
I think there's an important requirement is the policies. I think there's a huge requirement to make policies which are more women friendly, just not as entrepreneurship, but I think in terms of building infrastructure, providing basic facilities. I must thank HSBC, listening to Anushka that there's so much HSBC is doing for women entrepreneurship. I wish, this was available all across all the banks and it was so easy for women to actually do business like naturally as anyone. And I would say that we require people at the policy level who can actually bring in a change in the infrastructure, basic facilities, and ease of doing business. Whether it is men or women is not the question, but just the ease of doing business, which makes it more versatile for people to actually take up this task.
Usha, on the policy part, I don't know, Anushka, whether you are aware, 2 years ago, our Women and Child Minister declared that there should be 6-month maternity leave for women. So
Correct.
Overall, but no provision for any paternity leave.
Exactly. So you need paternity, it has to be equitable.
Equitable. And then she made a statement publicly that, men are anyway going to relax and do nothing. So no paternity leave for them.
So that's where education is required,
exactly. What this did was, so like Usha said, our workforce participation is very low, 23%. Okay. And we are right in the league of countries like Afghanistan and other, okay, really in the bottom 5 in terms of this. And this reduced further because startups who are bootstrapped do not want to get in women who will go off for 6 months,
Exactly.
They want women who will be committed. So you are actually not, if it was equitably available for both of them, then a startup founder will not hesitate.
Correct.
Because he knows that his male colleague can equally take 3 months off. So I think one policy level that is a very...
Yeah, so exactly from that point of view, if it is not equitable, then you're creating more bias actually.
More bias.
Actually defeating the whole purpose.
Yeah, and particular age group will completely lose out on
that, yeah. And so also if you're putting in a policy of maternity leave, then there should be some subsidy for even the businesses.
Businesses.
Otherwise, it's not really going to work.
Nobody's going to work.
So the policies have to actually understand the problem deep down rather than just make a policy. And that is where I came saying that you need people with a lot of know-how in terms of what actual ground level problems are when you make a policy and to then debate on it and see what the impacts are going to be.
Exactly. So instead of celebration, it turned out to be really opposite for women, in terms of...
it's become
very,
much
very
more
difficult.
defeating.
If you see, many startup founders are actually part of earlier startups, right?
Yeah.
Because they've seen experience and they come out and start. So then women, if they're not taken in a startup, what chance do they have to found their own companies? So you're starting there itself, the gap. So I think
yes. So like to get a job, they say you need to have experience, but if you don't give a job at all, when you get an experience? So I think it's like the chicken and the egg story, and you just keep going around the same.
I know. So I think, so this is definitely the policies. But the second thing I want to really pledge is understanding of gender lens and understanding of equity, that should be common across, and not only for women. See, it's about women and it's only women talking about it. We need to co-opt men also.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so that would be my pledge, to make this gender lens across, irrespective of
It has
who is an
inclusive.
entrepreneur, whether it's male, female, whoever, they all need to. Yeah, that would be my.
Very, very well.
Sorry, I took up a lot of time.
So, Ragini, you were right. We actually did have some question on chat, which the administrator has actually sent me on my WhatsApp. So I will read that out.
Sure, do.
We have one question from Mona Quatra. The question is to Usha. So, Usha, are there any sectors or areas that are today's sunrise sectors that you feel women should consider from an impact perspective?
There are many. If you talk about impact, there are a lot of areas where we see the WHO sustainability goals. And I think once you register in the Startup India program, you'll see what are the kind of subsidies and incentives that the government is giving. So those are the areas which the environment has become a very, very essential area. The ESG that we talk about, the social sector is really thriving today. Education is, I think, going to be forever alive, where we see the changes in terms of digitization. Digitization, we are seeing, is really going to change the entire business and livelihoods of people. So I think that is one of the areas that women can and easily actually enter into. I think Amazon with their AWS services are now promoting women entrepreneurship in terms of giving them free training programs on the segment. So I think those are the areas. And of course, there is today, if you see, I think any area that you think that there is a gap is an area where you can actually grow.
Thank you, Usha. We do have one more question from Anu. She wants to ask to Ragini that debt, it's more like a food for thought. She says that debt is equal to non-diluted capital. So are debt funds the solution for this to get more non-dilutive capital?
Definitely, debt is a solution. So normally it is understood that debt is expensive because you're paying interest. And equity, we don't need to return back, but actually equity is more expensive if your business becomes, successful. It's a non-dilutive capital, but one caution here is use of debt capital. So equity should be used for long-term things like product development, research, when you're figuring out product market fit. But when your product is market ready and you have revenues, that is when you should consider non-dilutive capital to be able to up inventories. So you should not use debt for, let's say, doing a research development or entering into a new market. Sorry, my internet is not behaving well. I'll just stop my video and I don't know. Was I clear, Shweta? Did it make sense? I don't know.
Yeah, for most part of it, Ragini, we just lost in the last 5-10 seconds, but we could get the gist of what you said.
Yeah. So use non-dilutive capital for uses such as working capital and short-term uses. For long-term and riskier uses, use equity.
Fantastic. Thank you for the guidance. So we do not have any further questions from the audience. With that, I would like to just check if there are any final thoughts to add on this topic.
Shweta, we want to hear your story.
Well, my story might not be very relevant for this forum. I'm not an entrepreneur per se, but I'm definitely very, very entrepreneurial at heart, I would say. That I treat my job as my own intrapreneur. I would say, I always call myself intrapreneur. So from the age of 16, I have not borrowed a penny from anyone. I am also a second child like you, Ragini, and financially we were quite strained. So most that I could make of my education was to do a chartered accountancy, which was very inexpensive at that time. But obviously, I was also very interested in finance. So I had to go through a lot of initial struggles. And I also belong to a Marwari community, which if you belong to or you know, would know that is quite conservative. So I did have to work very hard to make a case to study and have that higher education, to leave the city, not for marriage, but for a job. And then finally to leave the country and go to US at the age of 22. So all of it was such a struggle that I thought that maybe the future generation should not struggle so much for any of these opportunities. And hence I've invested myself to bringing about more balance in every day. I have worked internally on gender initiatives in the bank for almost 10 years. And after doing that for 10 years, I realized that HSBC is already very progressed and thinking very autonomously about gender challenges, issues, and it's now being driven top down. So my efforts were not adding a lot of very incremental value. And I'm very glad that it wasn't, because we are already there in terms of how it is built in as a part of the conversation. So further on from there, I wanted to impact some of the other communities which might be perhaps, I wouldn't say underserved, but where we still need to make some advancements. And I thought, what better than women entrepreneurs? So last I joined the Women Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, curated a accelerator program, Accelerating Women Entrepreneurs. Spoke to you, spoke to Startup India, HSBC, got everyone on board. And since then, I feel so passionate about this whole journey. I really feel that the challenges are very real, and we all have to commit ourselves to move the dial and move forward. Thank you everyone. It was such a fantastic conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed all the different perspectives. Thank you for joining us today. I will pass it back to Shinjini. She did ask me to leave about 10 minutes towards the end of the session. So Shinjini, back to you.
Thanks, Shweta.
I'm not sure. Let me call her probably. I'm not sure, but looks like they might be caught up with organizing for the next session. So we will close it here today. And once again, thanks a lot. 19 November is actually recognized as the Women Entrepreneurship Day. I didn't know this until a while back, but I really think that women need to be celebrated, appreciated, and supported every single day, and not just one day. So with that note, I would say once again, thank you for doing so much for the women entrepreneurs and for sharing your thoughts and perspectives today.
Thank you. Thanks, Ragini. Shweta.
Thanks, Ragini.
Anushka, it's been wonderful
Nice meeting you
with all of you.
Likewise.
Lovely to see you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.